Margaret Cho, thank you for joining us today. We're such fans of yours at Queerties. The first thing I feel like I should ask, with everything that's going on right now, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you healthy? Are you safe?
Yes, I'm doing great. I think that it's an incredible time. It's a very important time. I think that it's Pride Month, and what an exciting, amazing time to be present. I think that gay liberation has so much to learn from Black Lives Matter and also vice versa.
Yeah.
The gay liberation really comes from the Black liberation movement. And really, we all stem from the Black liberation movement, from the civil rights movement of the 60s. Like, I think that that's where we all got the idea from.
Yeah.
That in the women's movement and Asian American civil rights movement, and so much we owe back to the original civil rights movement. And so this is the return to that, which I think is so important. So it's really exciting. I'm excited for next week. We have the big kind of joint Black Lives Matter and Gay Pride march, which I think is so incredible. And every day these marches get bigger and bigger. And so, yeah, I'm doing great. And certainly it's just really interesting how this year has turned out to be really extraordinary. You never know what's going to happen.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So have you been going to the protests yourself?
Yes. And it's been really incredible. I think that they started out like the first couple of days of them, and now the tone has really changed.
Yeah.
And so and now that the curfew's been lifted, and the sort of sense of the sentiment has changed, and then people have been going out, and and of course it's the feeling, and there are more people now, like, and the feeling around it has changed, and the idea around it has changed. And I think that it's going to continue to change, and we're going to see more change, and I'm grateful for that. So I'll be interested to see by next week too what it's going to do to see how that will be implemented, in terms of government, in terms of what we're going to see in real life change, and in terms of what the cities are going to do individually, and what this means for us as a country.
Absolutely. Well said. Now, the other thing I need to ask you about as an Asian American woman is, have you at all been harassed because of COVID-19? We've been reporting on stories of Asian Americans being harassed by right-wing people, blaming them for the virus, which is silly, but it is going on. What's your experience been?
It's out there, and I know that I haven't personally experienced anything like that. I mean, it's, to me, very unbelievable, but of course, totally believable. I think that it's like, I mean, I couldn't imagine it, but I totally believe it happens. I haven't personally experienced it, but I know it's out there, and I know that a lot of that seems also, it's so April. I mean, that was happening like 3 weeks ago. It's saying, where are the
No, that's true. That's true.
Things have changed so much. Things have changed so much in the last 6 weeks. But it is very much something that was really prevalent and a big deal. And that kind of reflexive nature of Americans to, and it's not just America, it's everywhere. It's like to want to be racist. Like, that's where we go to. That's kind of almost like human nature, or where we go to when we feel threatened, is we want to blame the other. We want to blame the other people who sort of just got here on all of the problems, or the people that we don't know as well, or the people who look different, or whatever, whoever the other is, and so it kind of brings out the worst in people when we have fear. And I think maybe now that we're sort of used to living with the virus, living with this kind of condition, maybe we're sort of sitting with ourselves long enough to go back to what's really wrong with us, which is why we're confronting racism in a deeper way. And I think that's why this has kind of brought about much more of a self-seeking, self-searching moment in another development in this whole Black Lives Matter movement.
No, that's very well said, and I think you make excellent points there. Hopefully, I'm starting to see something hopeful come out of this. Mm-hmm. So that gives me a little bit of comfort in these very discomforting times.
Yes.
So I want to ask a little bit about your work. Your stand-up obviously has all of us, constantly laughing our asses off, which is a beautiful thing. And I'm sure you're coming up with great material right now. But one of my favorite things that you've ever done was earlier this year. It was a series called Visible Out on Television, which you narrated one episode. You also offer your personal insights into this history of queer images in TV. I think it's one of the best things I've seen all year. It's absolutely wonderful. And what's in it surprised me so much in terms of, well, gay people have always been on TV, even when it wasn't always clear. What was the biggest surprise to you in participating in the series?
I think that we've always existed out there, that the kind of the coding, and the coding of like our identity, it sort of goes through, like, identity is really it's really amazing because it allows us to exist in these spaces that really show that identity is not really about sexuality. It really goes so much deeper, and that our sexuality is just one element of who we are, and that identity is really it's so important to put out there, and that the coding it made it so possible for us to kind of go everywhere. And like, when I remember when I was a kid, that I grew up in a gay bookstore,
right?
And so coding that the gayness of the Village People was so apparent to me. Like, I knew exactly what they were doing, I knew who they were, and I knew what they were about, but that they were kind of almost being portrayed like children's action figures, which is very, very smart. And the innocence of that is really beautiful. And you almost see a replay in RuPaul's Drag Race now, which the main appeal of RuPaul's Drag Race is to young people, to mostly young girls, which I think is really important to recognize, is that there is a real appeal to a very young audience, which I think is really remarkable and really beautiful. It really shows I think the playfulness, the character, and the joy that the audience is kind of open to, and how drag is really about re-examination of childhood and fantasy and play, which is so important, because I think a lot of times when you're gay, you're really forced to be out there alone and grow up real fast. So drag is a way to go back and reclaim that childhood, which has elements of the reading room and clowns and makeup and dolls and all of those things that we have to sort of give up in becoming an adult really fast. So I love that about sort of the gay coding, which is what I really learned going back and doing that series. It's really like we sort of reclaim these elements, and we've always had them in television.
No, I love that. It's so true. The idea that young girls now watch RuPaul's Drag Race, which is a show when I was a teenager, I couldn't have even imagined would ever exist. It still just kind of blows my mind.
It's great.
And I love what you say there about identity and coding. And it's so perfect because so much of your work deals with intersectionality and ideas of identity and labels and how transgressive they can be. you also, you know, whether I don't think anybody, whether they like your humor or not, would ever deny that you are someone who is fearless when it comes to just sort of bearing her soul on stage, which is so powerful to me personally as a writer to watch.
Mm.
How do you do it? Like, how do you get yourself to a point where you are so unself-conscious that you can go out and talk about your mother and your sexuality and your sexual history and your upbringing and all these deeply personal elements?
Well, I think that if you're a writer, you know, there's just that's all that I have is to mine my own history and my own mythology and my stories for content that I can share that is, you know, that's both poetic and painful, but interesting and funny, and that's enlightening to me, and that is, you know, worth sharing, that has meaning. You know, that you want something that is earnest, and it's got to have some kind of pathos to it to make sense. And so, and the writers that I enjoy have no problem doing that, and that their pain is why I continue to go back to them. And so I think that that's like, you know, something to treasure. You know, that's what I always enjoyed, and especially like, you know, my own, the people that I would admire, like the artists that I always look to, oftentimes like songwriters, like Alanis Morissette is a good example of somebody that I just love. You know, she's so amazing. Or like Liz Phair, or
Yeah.
Courtney Love,
Yes.
or Joan Armatrading, who's somebody that I think is just a genius. You know, they all really have no problems writing from a place of pain and suffering that is very, very transgressive and revealing, and not in a flattering way.
No.
Either you know, where they come out looking completely without blame or anything. It's really very self-revelatory, but at the same time really heroic. So I think that it's kind of, you know, it's important to lay it out there and almost let the audience kind of decide. But, you know, you want to have something honest to share. And I really appreciate that when artists can do that.
Absolutely. And I mean, the other question that comes to mind, again, as a writer, is how does being that honest about yourself and your relationships affect the people around you? How does it affect your relationship, for example, with your mother, who you know?
Oh, she likes it.
Does she? That's great.
She likes it. She thinks it's, that's, I think, because like women in my family and women in Korea in general, when they get to 50 and above, become they fade into the background, and that's really sad. You know, they become invisible, and that's really a state that they don't want to be in. They want to continue to be seen. And so I think my mother appreciates that she's still able to be seen, and that's what we all want, you know, and so I think that's what she appreciates. So she likes it. She actually really likes it. I think the other people in my life, I think they like it. I mean, I don't think that it's caused any real rifts, as far as I know. As far as it's gone, it's definitely something that hasn't been too much of a problem so far, which is good.
That's fantastic. No, and especially how long you've been at it. I mean, if it's not a problem yet, hopefully it won't be a problem later on either.
Yeah.
How would you say that has affected the way people view you in the business? How has that affected the kind of career opportunities that have come to you as a writer and as an actress? Do you find yourself sort of pigeonholed into different areas of, oh, she's the one that's always talking about the political stuff, or she's always going to talk about the Asian stuff or the gay stuff or the queer stuff, you know?
I think that would exist anyway, just because of who I am. I think that that's never, I think that it's never without a kind of consideration, because of who I am is such an important part of my subject matter. It's always going to be about identity, because you could never separate it. My emergence really came at a time when identity was something that you wanted so little of. You know, I was starting out at a period of time where it was the era of kind of quote unquote like observational comedy, which
Yes.
is heterosexual white male comedy was the gold standard. And so you didn't want to veer from that. Like it was like that observational wry, but from one point of view, that observation was all you wanted. And it was all sort of like, like observations that I appreciate, like whether it was David Letterman or Gary Shandling, these guys, but it was from their point of view, because that was the observational point,
Right.
the place you wanted to observe from. And so Identity didn't have a kind of a point that that you just didn't want to like add to. And so I had to sort of like combat that by making it all about identity. And so then when you are so rebellious in that, like when you completely rebel and make it all about your identity, then it's impossible to veer from that later. So it's a very strange thing to kind of come at it like an industry where you're completely like rejecting all of the values of it from within it. So it's very difficult, but I think it's worked out okay.
I would say so. I mean, All American Girl, of course, holds a very important place in television history. And I know in your life, though, it's probably a very different feeling for you. Have you ever considered doing another series? Have you ever been offered, to do a series regular role or a series lead role again?
Yes, I have. I've tried to do a couple of different development things, and so it hasn't worked out yet, but I still really feel very hopeful. I would love to do television again, and I think that there's, television has changed so much, and there's so many different ways to do TV, and I would really love to. I think that it would be really exciting to. I think that it's definitely time, and yeah, I'm definitely like very like excited to work on something.
That would be amazing. You have to keep us posted,
Yes,
regardless.
sure.
What's most satisfying to you? Your career is so varied. You're an actor, you're a writer, you're a stand-up comic, you're a belly dancer. Like, what gives you the greatest catharsis, the greatest satisfaction?
Well, I love stand-up comedy. I mean, to me, it's really the kind of filter through everything goes through. Like everything I do is really about that. And I just, that's the thing that I miss the most about the life that is kind of happening now, is that we're not being able to go out and do shows is very strange. But, it's certainly something that I know that I'll go back to. It's something that I know that I'll always do. It's the one constant in my life. It's the one thing that I do most days when we're not in lockdown. And the one thing I will go back to as soon as we're done.
Here's looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking forward to most when all this is finished?
Yes. I know that everything that I had scheduled for this year will all automatically rolled into next year. So sort of taking the whole year off to roll into 2021.
Awesome. So last question then. How are you celebrating Pride this year?
Well, I'll celebrate Pride by fueling all of my attention and energy into the Black Lives Matter movement and the pride that I have, and all of the gayness of it into Black Trans Lives Matter, and also into this whole sort of like thing of like, let's just completely like focus in one thing in one direction, and let's like it's all this like motion, because it's time to get this done, get this all together. We owe so much to the Black Lives Matter movement, and so much to the civil rights movement, and so it's like time to join forces with Gay Pride.
Here.
It's time. We're doing it, and it's happening. It's definitely happening in LA, and so this is the time, and it's 50 years, which is so incredible for Gay Pride. It's so powerful. it's like I don't know, it's a real milestone, and it's an exciting time. So I'm happy. It's almost going to be the best Pride yet.
I certainly hope you're right, and I share your sentiment. I think things are getting better, and I feel a momentum that I haven't felt before. So it's a very exciting time to be alive.
Yes.
Margaret, you've been absolutely wonderful. Is there anything you'd like to chat about or discuss before I let you move on with your day?
I'm excited. I'm excited about Pride. I'm excited about the summer. I am still doing my podcast throughout the summer
nice.
and throughout lockdown, which is on Irios. It's called The Margaret Cho, and it's available anywhere you get podcasts.
Awesome. It's definitely one I'm going to have to recommend to our readers. So
yes.
Thank you for that. Well, and thank you for being with me today.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.